So, Christmas is upon us. Happy time of year is also Thanksgiving, and Black Friday is also upon us. And I've been thinking about what kind of videos I want to do for the Christmas season, because I do have some plans, more or less, for the holiday season. And one idea went off in my head that I think was pretty cool. So, if you're not familiar with a channel called Paul's Hardware, it's basically a TechTuber channel where he does build videos and reviews of computer parts and whatnot. But he has a series on his channel where he does monthly build videos, where he goes to PCPartPicker or shops online to figure out the best parts for PCs at a specific price range, usually ranging from a few $100s to a couple thousand. And that's a very good series. I love watching it. I have a PC that I'm happy with already, and I don't necessarily need to get anything out of it. But a light bulb went off in my head, and I'm thinking, PCs streaming. PCs streaming. They go together. They're hand in hand. They cannot exist without the other. Well, they can exist without the other, but you get what I mean. Why not do the same thing, but for streamer gear specifically? And that's what this new series is all about. So, welcome to the inaugural episode of Stream Gear Sweep, where basically I put together build lists for PCs and gear and whatnot for streaming, and figure out how much you could expect to pay for any specific set of gear. And for this first inaugural video, we'll be focusing specifically on PC parts, because I know that Paul's Hardware does it specifically for PC parts only, but it's not always geared specifically towards streaming. And that's what I wanted to focus on for these particular videos. I wanted to focus on stuff that I would think would be good for streaming specifically. And it's going to focus a lot of AMD hardware, because that is really kind of the cheapest stuff you can buy right now. It's not, compared to NVIDIA, AMD hardware is nowhere near as expensive, because it's not quite as high-end, well, in some cases, not as well sought after. So that's what we're going to be focusing on for this first video. So let's get into everything, and let's see what our first build will entail. Alright, so I'm in PCPartPicker right now, and the builds I'm going to be featuring first and foremost here is a starter build, ranging in the $800 range. I managed to get as low as $812 in this case, after mailing rebates. And this system is not going to be the most powerful system in the world. It is going to be, if you want to game and stream on this system at the same time, you're going to encounter some issues. But if you're kind of more of a casual gamer and you want to stream and game on the same system and you're capable of doing that, this is a good system for that. I really can say so for certainty. So I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say here by saying there's going to be a lot of AMD systems in this video. The reason why I went with AMD over Intel is because AMD is not only better price to performance, but they offer more cores than Intel does at the same price point, hence the term price to performance. When it comes to things like OBS, it is highly threaded. The process that it does is very parallel, and having more cores and threads means more performance out of OBS. And again, if I were to go with Intel, it would be worse performance because you have fewer cores at the same price point. Now, the CPU I have slotted here is the AMD Ryzen 5 2600, not 3600 or 5600X, 2600. Another reason why I went with the 2600 over a 3600 is because the 3600 is still going for MSRP that it was a year ago when it first released. It's still $200. It's very expensive, and you get even though it's a bigger jump over performance over the 2600, I can't justify the price right now with how pricey everything else is right now. I mean, the 2600 will get the job done. It is not an awful CPU. I would highly recommend it if you're still if you're on a budget, and because you'll be still sitting on the AM4 platform, we have 2 generations worth of upgrade possibilities whenever you get around to doing that in the future. As for price, before I move on, in terms of the price, it's going for as low as $129 on Amazon. Not the cheapest ever, but it's certainly better than what the 3600 and 5600 is going on, especially when you consider that the 5600 is completely out of stock wherever you find it. I couldn't find a price for it anywhere. As for the CPU cooler, the cooler we decided to go with, or I decided to go with because it's just me, is the CryoRig H7. This is a fantastic single fan air cooler. In many cases, I think is better than anything from Noctua, in my opinion. I mean, Noctua fans are fantastic, but from my testing, that this one cooler is actually really good when it comes to keeping temps low. On my old Ryzen 5 1400, I was experiencing temperatures as low as 32C, or even dipping as below as 25, the upper 20s C. And this is a very fantastic little cooler for $67. It is fantastic. If you can find it in the local store, it's even better because it can probably be at a lower price than it is on Amazon. This is a fantastic cooler. It really trades blows very well with the comparable water coolers. So if you're looking for something that's cheap and you don't want to go for, you don't want to worry about the reliability of a water cooler, this is a good one for you. As for the motherboard, I had decided to go with a Gigabyte B450 Aorus Elite. I used to have one of these motherboards. Before, when I recently upgraded to B550, and this is the board that I upgraded from, the B450 Aorus Elite. This is a fantastic board. It has many features. It does support PCIe Gen 4, which is important for the later in the builds in this video. It has 2 M.2 slots, 4 DIMM slots, plenty of SATA connectability. It has an integrated I/O shield. Like, there's a lot to love about this board. Dang it, phone. There's a lot to love about this board, and if you're looking for something in the sub $100 range, this one's on Amazon going for about $95 right now. This board is fantastic. I actually got mine at a Micro Center for about $20 more. It was somewhere along the lines of about $115. So it's a fantastic board. I highly recommend it. Great BIOS too. I think the BIOS on Gigabyte boards, especially the Aorus ones, are some of the best. I think even if it's a little more convoluted to get to the parts that you want. If you're just trying to overclock with precision, I think Gigabyte does it better. Anyway, as for the RAM, I went with two 8GB sticks of Team T-Force Vulcan Z. You will have a total of 16 gigs. Now, the reason why I didn't go for 32 gigs is because it gets extremely expensive when it comes to this price point that I'm trying to keep myself to once you get further higher up the tiers. 16 gigs will do you fine. Like OBS can run just fine on 16 gigs of RAM. Yeah, it can run just fine on 16 gigs of RAM, and because the motherboard that we have chosen has 4 DIMM slots, you can always upgrade with 2 more in the future. It is just perfectly fine, being the fact that it's also at 300 DDR4 3000 cast latency 16. This is a really good kit for a solid $51. Like, you can't really do much better than this particular kit right here. That fast RAM means that Infinity Fabric is wonders for the CPU, milking even more performance out of it. And the cache latency, being as low as it is fantastic too. This is a good, overall this is a good kit, and I would highly recommend it. As for the storage, I went with a very reliable Western Digital Blue 500 gigabyte M.2 SSD. Western Digital is one of my favorite SSD manufacturers out there. I have had all of the hard drives that I have personally bought myself have been Western Digital. One was a Western Digital Blue, the other was Western Digital Black. These are fantastic drives. They make some of the best on the market, and even I would highly say that the WD Blue is highly underrated. Like, a lot of people use like Samsung 970 EVOs and Crucial MX 500s and stuff like that, and like all these other ones from Corsair, but they never use the WD Blue. It's very reliable, it's fast, and I would highly recommend it. This was not NVMe though. It's actually SATA, I believe, right? It does not say specifically what it is. I think it was not NVMe. It should be either PCIe or SATA. I don't know which one it is. I could probably look on Amazon here. Or actually, Newegg. Let's check that real quick. Is SATA. It is SATA. Okay, so you won't get the bandwidth from PCIe Gen 4, but it is still SATA, which will do you just fine. All right. As for the graphics card, this is also another oddity that I have chosen here. Now, again, I couldn't get this any lower than I really wanted it to. So I went with an ASRock Radeon RX 5600 XT. This is the Phantom Gaming DOC. It is a solid video card. I mean, say what you will about ASRock. I have an ASRock 5500 XT. That's the Challenger card in here. It's ran extremely quiet, extremely well. Has an integrated black backplate too. It's metal. It looks pretty good. I mean, ASRock is an underrated company in my opinion. There's a lot of good products from them, and this is a solid one too. The ASRock RX 5500. It's not an NVIDIA card. So if you're planning to use the hardware encoder on this card, you're not gonna get good quality out of it. However, there is an argument on using an AMD card when it comes to video editing. However, the hardware encoder on RDNA is insane. It is insane, this whole thing. So the quality in OBS is not great because the AMF plugin for OBS to use AMD's hardware encoder, it's not good. But if you're using a video editing piece of software like Vegas Pro, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, AMD RDNA cards, like the Navi cards, they are incredible. I like when I'm rendering video in Vegas Pro at 4K, it just rips through frames. It is incredibly fast. It is incredibly quick at rendering frames using the hardware encoder. It's just a fantastic. It's a really fantastic card for video editing specifically. Like, a lot of people would say that NVIDIA all the way, but they haven't tried the hardware encoder on this thing, and I can speak for experience. It gets the job done quickly and with vigor. So so it's not particularly great for encoding video with OBS, but when it comes to encoding video in your video editor, it's fast, and it's also a pretty solid card in gaming too. Usually averaging pretty good frame rates compared to its competition. It's not good to trade blows with the competition, but it gets close enough in my opinion, and that's all we really can ask for at $800. As for the case, I went with a good one, the Fantex Eclipse P300A Mesh. Now I have an OG P300 down here, which is the case my main system is in. It's a fantastic case. The fans on it are, well, the fan actually includes one fan on it, is kind of loud. So I have all the fans on it replaced with better fans that are even worse in this case. The case itself is fantastic, especially this one because it's a mesh front, so it includes more airflow. But the airflow on stock without the mesh is actually really good. I actually quite like it. You also get PSU shroud. You get support, some pretty good distance or space behind the motherboard tray for cable management. Although it's not industry leading, I'll tell you that much. The back of the case is just flat. There's not a ton of space, so I wouldn't call it industry leading. But it is sufficient if you know how to cable manage correctly. It includes two drive bays beneath, in front of the power supply, under the shroud. You get support for 240 rad or 120 on the top. It's a good case. I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a case that's cheap. This one's actually cheaper than its OG counterpart. It is $50 on Newegg right now, whereas the OG version, which what I bought it at, runs for about $70 right now, or $69 before tax. It's a solid case. Highly recommend it. Would not go with anything else. And lastly, as for the power supply, EVGA makes solid power supplies for their price. So I went with an EVGA BQ 600 watt 80 plus bronze semi-modular ATX power supply. This is a fantastic one. I used to use one, or I was going to use one before I had to take mine back because the system I was going to put it in would not even be able to use the power supply because the whole thing was dead. All right, sorry about that. My camera overheated, which is weird because it never does that. It's actually one of the very few times it's ever done that. Thank you, Nikon. You make a solid camera that doesn't overheat very often, but this time it did. Anyway, power supply, last part on this particular list. The EVGA BQ 680 plus bronze semi-modular power supply. EVGA makes some solid power supplies. They are very good, they're very solid, they're very high quality components, and you don't want to cheap out in your power supply because if the power supply were to go, it has the potential to take the entire system with it. So you don't want to cheap out on it whatsoever. And EVGA is a solid company to do that with. There's not really a whole lot you should be looking at a power supply. You should be looking at the quality of it, the 80 plus certification if it has one. Not all of them do. You generally want at least bronze, and the wattage of it. I think I said that. Also, you want to see if it's a modular, semi-modular, or fully modular. What that modular means is that a semi-modular power supply has the ATX power and supplemental CPU power pre-hooked up to the PSU, but everything else like PCIe, SATA, and other things like that have to be plugged in manually. A fully modular power supply means like everything has to be plugged in manually. So you want semi-modular at least, but fully modular means you can pick and choose what cables go where and what cables can get plugged in and whatnot if you need them to be. Fantastic, but overall VGA BQ, fantastic PSU for solid which is solid for the price point, which is about $73 on Newegg right now. As for the next one, the only differences here is that the CPU, the motherboard, and the really it's not really the only difference. As I mentioned, the previous one comes to a total of about $812.91 after after mail-in rebate, which is base total about $842.91. It is, I couldn't get any higher or any lower because it's just very difficult to build a cheap PC these days, or at least right now, because a whole lot of new stuff came out. So there's a whole lot with the economy the way it is. There's a ton of inflation too. So it's a really bad time to be building a PC, but it's also a very good one because there's a whole lot of new stuff out if you can get your hands on it. All right, hold up. So this is kind of awkward. This next part of the video I'm going to be cutting out entirely because I go over two different builds that, well, they're not really different. They're actually basically the exact same thing, minus a few differences that end up bumping up the price a lot higher than it really originally was supposed to be. And again, this video wasn't easy to make because it was just, there's a lot of inflation in the market right now, and it's very difficult to find cheap parts that are good. And I don't want to part you out a build that's going to die in like a few months, which is hence why I went with a little more higher end hardware than some may would have gone for. So I'm going to cut out the rest of this video and just go straight to the end because all of the information from this point is complete garbage and is completely pointless and completely arbitrary. So I'll try to avoid doing this in the future because honestly, it's not really important information. I ended up blabbering on for this video too long. It's gonna make the video too long. So yeah, I'm gonna skip right to the end and we'll do that. Okay, moving on. All right, so that was kind of a long video. I'm sorry if I was kind of all over the place with this one. This is kind of like the first in a series, and usually the first videos in a series are kind of all over the place, but I'm trying my best to kind of part out parts lists that were cheap enough that you could get your hands on them with the parts that you can still get your hands on, because there were actually a lot of options that were cheaper that you can't get your hands on because inventory and COVID and everything. But I try my best to keep it as cheap as possible, and I will also include links in the description below to every specific part I have featured in this video, so you can take a look at it yourself and buy the parts as you wish. You can mix or match, do whatever you want. It's your part, it's your system. I'm just trying to help you find the parts you can get for it. But sound off in the comments below if you enjoyed this video, because I actually had a lot of fun making it too. It's not the most robust video in the world, and again, it will only get better with time. But if you enjoy the video and would like to see more of it, please tell me in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. And if you also enjoy the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this and plenty of other. I actually do kind of videos on like more like focusing on the content that you want to make and looking for the beginner's perspective and getting a better perspective on your content. I do all that kind of stuff too. If you'd also like to talk with the community at large, we also have a Discord server, the Spurgian Empire, if you would like to join it. Link will be also down below. But yeah, thank you for joining this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.